I'm in the town of Robert Burns, the undisputed capital of southwest Scotland. This is the Queen of the South. This is Dumfries. Dumfries is packed with history, independent cafes, 2 great record stores and a football team that's on the up. Just a few of the reasons why I'm so pleased to now live just down the road. In 1857, a local poet called David Dunbar called the town the Queen of the South during an election speech. The nickname stuck. And why not? It's great branding. For this reason, the football club has one of the most unusual names in Scotland. For those who like old school grounds, then Palmerston Park is right up your street. Currently languishing, only way is up for Queens. If there are any Hollywood actors watching, Rabbie Burns stood on the terraces here. Look at the potential. Well, you never know. Fairy tales can happen here in Dumfries. This is Moat Brae, an elegant townhouse that used to be known as Number 1 Dumfries. A youthful J.M. Barrie used to visit 2 friends here in the 1870s and play in the garden. This enchanted land beside the River Nith fired his imagination and was the genesis of Peter Pan. After much restoration work, Moat Brae is now the national centre for children's literature and storytelling, a haven for young imagination. Now, imagine this. The River Nith used to be an important county border between Dumfries and Galloway. On the west bank was a village called Bridgend, administered by Kirkcudbright, over 20 miles away, a massive distance in the 18th century. If you committed a crime in Dumfries, you only had to run across Devorgilla Bridge. Once you were over here on the west side, then the law simply couldn't follow you. You were scot-free. The village became Maxwell Town, and despite initial hostility, it eventually joined with Dumfries in 1929. The bridge itself is one of the most historic in Scotland. The oldest part of the bridge dates to 1621. The last major changes were made much more recently, in 1794. And talking about laws, Bonnie Prince Charlie holed up in Dumfries whilst retreating from England in 1745. He set up his headquarters in this magnificent building, allegedly behind the fiction section in Waterstones.
Dumfries is probably Scotland's best kept secret. It's a lovely little town, a population just on 30,000, and it's got so much opportunity, it's unbelievable. It's one of these places that people don't really know what it's like until they come here, and when they come here they're quite surprised at how nice it is. The town is pretty old, but it's standing the test of time not too badly at all. It needs a little bit of investment here and there, but the opportunities, as I said, are amazing. They really are, because there's so much can go on in this little town. It's just getting back on its feet after COVID and after everything else, and it's looking good. We have quite a lot of festivals going on in and around Dumfries. We've got a good folk scene in Dumfries. There are about 4 or 5 venues. We've got a really thriving Theatre Royal, which is the oldest working theatre in Scotland. One of the things about Dumfries and Dumfries' business people is that they're very resilient. We were hit quite badly down here in the White Sands with flooding. It happens usually twice or thrice a year, and every 4 or 5 years we get a bad one, which we had just last year. But every single business has bounced back, all, I would say, bigger and better than before.
When I first walked through Dumfries, the fountain was a sorry sight. It commemorates the introduction of fresh water to the town after cholera outbreaks in the mid-19th century. Led by the Stove Network, the restoration of the fountain has been a community labour of love, and its recent unveiling has brought sparkle to the town centre. When it catches the sun, as it does every day in Dumfries, I could watch it for hours. As you drive through the town, you'll see many signs for the Crichton. So what is the Crichton? Well, only one of Dumfries' biggest surprises. This impressive campus was the brainchild of Elizabeth Crichton. She was prevented from founding a University of Dumfries So instead, in 1839, she built the Crichton Institution for Lunatics. I'll call it a psychiatric hospital. It became a very forward-thinking medical institution. In later years, Easterbrook Hall, now a venue, and the imposing Crichton Memorial Church were added. The last patients left in 2011, and the campus now houses a number of colleges, as well as the University of Glasgow and the University of the West of Scotland. So many years later, her objective was fulfilled. Elizabeth Crichton would be very pleased indeed. You'll find more evidence of pioneering locals in the museum. The landmark tower was converted from a windmill to an observatory in 1835, which was appropriate really, as decades later Robert Wayland from Dumfries pioneered the telescope that mapped the moon for Neil Armstrong and co. And not wishing to boast, of course, but the bicycle was invented in a village just outside Dumfries by Kirkpatrick Macmillan in the mid-19th century. But no, he didn't wear lycra. So what of Rabbi Burns? After all, he is everywhere in Dumfries. Scotland's national poet Robert Burns spent the last years of his life in Dumfries working as an excise officer. He died in this house in 1796 at the age of just 37.
Robert Burns lived here for the last 3 years of his life, from May 1793 to July 1796. His wife Jean lived here for another 38 years after his death. When Burns was living here, his wife Jean lived with him, and so did up to 5 to 6 children at any one time, all under the age of 10 years old. So a very lively household.
How did he get any work done in those circumstances?
Well, he had a study in here which he could come to. He also wrote outside when he was travelling around. He often did that. He took a pen and paper with him everywhere he went, and he was often writing. And he would come home late at night from his work, and certainly when everybody was asleep, he would sit down and write down his poetry at that point. People come from all over the world. Our most common visitors are usually from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, but we do have a lot from the European Union. Holland has been very popular this year, Germany and England.
When international visitors come here, are they surprised by how small the house is?
They're actually surprised by how big the house is, because Burns' reputation is that he died in poverty, and this actually pays a lie to that. I suppose the most treasured object that I would say that was here is probably his signature, which is in the glass in the small study. He wrote it there in about 1795, and it's an authentic signature of him. The other most treasured possession is the first edition of the Kilmarnock edition of poetry. 1786, the first book that he published, and the book that made him famous. We have a first edition of that, so that's very popular.
And when you've seen the house, you should cross the river to the old watermill that now houses the Robert Burns Centre. In the Gothic surroundings of St Michael's Churchyard, and amongst many of his contemporaries, Burns has an impressive white mausoleum. However, of equal importance is the statue to his loyal and long-suffering wife, Jean Armour, just outside the church. It was erected in 2004. And about time too. Many of the pubs that Burns frequented are still here, the most famous being the Globe, an ancient hostelry that was his favourite watering hole. He praised the food back then, now it has a Michelin star. Dumfries has a richness of history that other towns can only dream about. With a little more investment, it could shout louder about its achievements. One day, the Queen of the South will be seen as one of Scotland's cultural and tourism hubs. One day soon.